You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, we have what I think is the most aggressive move yet by Jack Smith, one specifically intended to land Donald Trump in pretrial detention. Can you speak on what happened here?
Yeah, there's a new 32-page court filing by Jack Smith that is going hard after the gag order. Remember, Judge Chutkan, who's presiding over the DC prosecution of Donald Trump, imposed a gag order, told Donald Trump, you can't talk about the witnesses, you can't talk about the court staff, you can't talk about the team of prosecutors, Jack Smith and his team. But then the defense sought a stay, that is a temporary pause while they file another brief and maybe try to appeal it. And the judge, for some reason, granted that temporary pause. Well, now Jack Smith has gone hard, not only asking the judge to lift that temporary stay, put the gag order back in place, but he also said something that indicates he's trying to walk Donald Trump step by step into a jail cell pending trial. Pre-trial, not when he goes to trial and is convicted, but it is a strong move. It's a bold move, but it's an appropriate and I think a necessary move if Donald Trump's dangerous, inflammatory rhetoric is to be controlled and if the witnesses are to be protected.
Okay, so why do you think Jack Smith is making this move? Why ramp up the stakes like this all of a sudden?
Because the gag order was in place for just a few days, protecting the witnesses, the court staff, and Jack Smith and his team. And when the judge paused it, what did Donald Trump do? Oh, he started to get on his third-rate social media platform, threatening the witnesses, calling Jack Smith a deranged thug, which he would have been prohibited from doing under the gag order, and basically continuing to endanger everybody who was involved in the endeavor of trying to hold Trump accountable for his crime. So I think Jack Smith said, no, you see, that proves the point as to why the judge believed the gag order was necessary in the first place. And if you get about halfway through this 32-page new court filing, Brian, Jack Smith kind of summarizes and crystallizes the danger posed by Donald Trump in one sentence. Here's what he says. He says, there has never been a criminal case in which a court has granted a defendant an unfettered right to try his case in the media, to malign the presiding judge as a fraud and a hack, to attack the prosecutors as deranged and thugs, and after promising witnesses and others, if you go after me, I'm coming after you, target specific witnesses with attacks on their character and credibility, even suggesting that one witness's actions warrant the punishment of death. Jack Smith makes it clear he's not playing, he's not mincing words, he's not pulling punches. He says, Judge, you need to put this gag order back in place. And then Jack Smith kind of moves on from there.
Now, in the event that Judge Chutkan does reimpose the gag order and makes the gag order a specific condition of Donald Trump's release, meaning he will no longer be on release if he violates that gag order, do you think Trump will go ahead and violate it? Because thus far, he's not shown a ton of restraint or discipline or self-control beyond that of a very small child.
So let me get this straight, Brian. The question is, if the gag order is reimposed, will Donald Trump violate it?
Yeah.
So is water wet and is fire hot? I'm gonna go with yes. And here's the beauty of what Jack Smith did in this lengthy court filing. You have to plow through the first 30 pages, but when you get to the next to last page, page 31, there's a little bit of legal mumbo jumbo in there, but let's try to decipher it. They say, Judge, we don't want you to just impose a gag order, such that if he violates the gag order, maybe you can do what Judge Engoron is doing and figure out, should I fine him $5,000? Should I fine him $10,000? No, we want you to reimpose the gag order, and we want you to make it a specific condition of his continued pretrial release. Here's the beauty of that. If the judge makes it a specific condition that he must comply with the gag order while on pretrial release, there's another part of the law that kicks in. It's 18 United States Code, section 3148 for those scoring at home. And it says, if somebody violates a specific condition of pretrial release that has been imposed by the court, then they are subject to being revoked on pretrial release. An order of detention should be lodged, and they're also responsible potentially for criminal contempt of court. So what Jack Smith is doing is he's trying to tee up the possibility that if Donald Trump violates the gag order, if it's reimposed, he's not just going to get fined, he's going to find himself in a jail cell until his trial date, which begins on March 4th, and through the entirety of the trial until the verdict is returned.
And do you think that Judge Chutkan will grant this request by Jack Smith? Will grant this? I guess it's kind of like a trigger so that the moment he does violate his gag order, it would trigger another set of events that would ultimately and hopefully lead him into a jail cell.
I think if anybody is up to the task, it's Judge Chutkan. She is strong. She is fearless. And I don't think Donald Trump would be wise to trust her or to test her resolve, because, you know, federal judges in particular, they take it pretty darn seriously when they impose conditions of release. They expect those conditions to be followed. And if Donald Trump has shown us anything, it's that he is either unwilling or unable to abide by conditions of release.
And is this an unusual move for a prosecutor to make?
You know, yes and no. The unusual part is the gag order. You know, gag orders are not issued every day by courts. They're pretty unusual. And that's because there is a First Amendment right of free speech. And when you start to gag a defendant, you start to restrict his speech pending trial. You know, there is a robust argument that, well, wait a minute, you're kind of stepping a toe over the First Amendment free speech protection. So that part is unusual.
Right, but I would argue, and I think this is probably your argument too, is that most defendants don't also have a platform to be able to reach the entire country and a history of inciting most of their supporters to violence.
Not only that, Brian, but I was in court during the argument on this gag order a couple of weeks ago, and Judge Chutkan laid it out. She said, any other defendant who was on pretrial release who called the prosecutor handling his case a deranged thug would find himself revoked on release, sitting in a jail cell in pretrial detention. When I heard that, Brian, I mean, one, that is inarguably true. She's right about that. But two, it also highlights the unequal application of the law. Why isn't the law being applied to Donald Trump as it was intended to be applied? And frankly, as it's applied to every other defendant in the country. That makes me feel like the institutions of government are not quite up to the challenge. They're not meeting the urgency of the moment. But I'll tell you, Jack Smith is doing everything he can to get Trump where he needs to be, so Judge Chutkan will be able to comfortably say, told you once, told you twice, you violated a condition I set for you. Now you're going to sit in a jail cell pending trial.
Okay, and finally, what is the timeline for some type of a decision here?
I have a feeling we're going to see a prompt decision. Jack Smith's brief was just filed. I don't know that there has been oral argument scheduled again on the gag order issue, but if it is to be scheduled, we'll probably hear about it as soon as tomorrow. But I think the courts have Donald Trump's number. They're not letting him play the delay game, weaponize the delay inherent in the system. They're going to keep moving through, I think, all of these issues in a really expeditious fashion. And then Judge Chutkan has made it clear that we are in the chute to begin trial on March 4th. And, you know, we're finally going to see Donald Trump perhaps, you know, held accountable for his democracy-busting crimes.
Okay, well, obviously a lot to stay on top of here, especially with regard to this immediate decision as to whether the gag order will be reimposed and whether it'll be reimposed with this kind of condition that if Donald Trump breaks it, that he can be sent over to pretrial detention. So to stay on top of everything that's going on right now, please make sure to subscribe. The links are right here on the screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.